Did I screw?
You're listening to Prosper in the Kingdom, the podcast where faith meets practical strategies to help you become healthy, wealthy, and wise. Join hosts John Cleaver and Wendy Lee as they share insights to equip you in your journey toward abundance, spiritually, financially, and beyond. Just a reminder, every situation is unique. The content of this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as specific financial or medical advice.
Welcome back, everybody. Wendy Lee and John C. here with another Prosper in the Kingdom. So, Wendy, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Happy to be here. Staying warm.
I know, right?
Sorry, there we go.
Over this cold stuff, man. And we started baseball. My son plays at University of Kentucky, and we were in Evansville, Indiana this past weekend, which great people, but it shouldn't be snowing during a baseball game. I'm just going to throw that out there as my official statement. But, so awesome weekend. I'm wearing my USA hat for the Canadian USA hockey game where USA came away with the gold. So congrats to those guys. And that was awesome, especially since the whole booing during the USA anthem. Was it 2 years ago, a year ago, maybe? I don't know. So anyway, you're like, clearly not a hockey fan. Okay, we'll move on from that. But again, congratulations to Team USA Hockey. And I know this is the soccer logo, but that's all I had on, and I wanted to wear it for the show. So it is what it is. So today we're talking about something both Wendy and I have been through on our personal journeys. And we're talking about divorce and finances, right? So we've got an event coming up that we'll talk about a little later called Divorce and Money. It's coming up this Thursday, the 26th. I can't believe we're already coming up on the end of February, 2 months into the new year already.
Yeah.
It's blazing by. But we're actually going to be talking about, divorce and how it can impact your finances today. And again, that's the whole point of this Prosper in the Kingdom podcast or the YouTube channel, wherever you're catching us, is teaching you how to become healthy, wealthy, and wise through practical stewardship and real life strategy and biblical application, right? As I mentioned, we're talking about divorce and what it really does to you financially. And it may not be what you think. Most people believe that divorce destroys your finances. I mean, you hear it all the time. But in many cases, it doesn't. And what it really is doing, though, is exposing it and exposing the thin margin you have, the unmanaged debt that you may be carrying, and exposes that financial structure that only worked as long as everything went fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as long as nothing went wrong, everything was fine. Well, obviously divorce is a big curveball. Over half the marriages out there face it. So, that's why it's like, hey, let's kind of plan accordingly, right? And that's where a strong financial plan really comes into play. But divorce just forces that financial conversation that most people avoid, right? So today we're going to walk through that 3M strategy we've been talking about, to make, manage, and multiply, and how applying it all concurrently, how it can kind of help you weather that storm, right? Especially in a season of transition. And it doesn't have to be a divorce, right? It can be a layoff or whatever the case may be. But that life curveball that comes at all of us, and it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, but when, right? So, let's kind of dive in there. I don't know if you want to kick us off with anything else, make sure we cover anything, Wendy, but
No, just to clarify, he meant if something happens bad, a curveball, not divorce.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. Thank you for that. Sometimes I get so into it. I'm in the zone, folks. So we're gonna have Wendy as my translator here. So, but no, I mean it's a reality, right? I mean, I know when I went through it, I don't want to share your story, but when I went through it, it was like, you're in this weird emotional place, and I'm a planner, right? So I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be, just accordingly X, Y, and Z, and it's not at all. It's I don't think you can totally prepare the mental game or things that come through it, and the financial game too. You can prepare for that, and because of that, the storm wasn't quite as bad for both of us. My ex-wife and myself, and I think a lot of it had to do with being in the industry, so to speak, and things like that. But when those two incomes become one, reality hits pretty quick, right? We work with a lot of clients that have gone through a divorce, are going through a divorce, as they get their ship corrected, their course corrected, so to speak, from a financial standpoint. But those expenses, you're trying to figure everything out. They don't shrink automatically, right? That debt doesn't just disappear. Lifestyle doesn't change overnight. And in a lot of cases, that adaptation needs to happen in your next chapter. And, I don't think anybody wants to stay in a relationship just for the financial aspect, but reality is it happens, right? And so, when that hand grenade does happen, it can make everything feel really manageable. All of a sudden feels tight, right? When you were getting by before and everything was fine, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do, right? And that doesn't mean you failed. I want you to hear me on that. It doesn't mean you failed. It means your structure just got stress tested. You failed, okay? And the stress test revealed a design flaw in your overall plan. And maybe you didn't have a plan, and that's, even if you don't have a financial plan, that is a plan, right? And it's probably not one you want. But, Proverbs 24:3-4 says, by wisdom, a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge, the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. Notice a progression. It's built, it becomes established, and then it's filled. And divorce doesn't destroy that house, right? If it's designed properly, it reveals whether it was established with wisdom, right? And in most cases, it's not. Most people don't even, have a basic spending plan and things like that. And so when something happens, guess what? It feels like, a hurricane just hit your life, and you're like standing up going, what the heck just happened, right? And, that creates some other stress and things like that doesn't really need to be there. So,
yeah, I think that, one thing when you're going through divorce is everything feels more expensive because, one, most of the time you're paying for attorneys. In the rare cases that people have things set up, they don't have to, but most of the time you're paying for attorneys. And I mean, those aren't cheap. You're starting at $5,000 out of the gate. You go from managing one household to multiple. And typically, it's not always, but typically one person is more the earner that has to take care of the other during separation.
Yeah.
And, margin gets tight. And when you don't have margin, every decision feels urgent and every expense feels heavy and every unexpected cost creates anxiety. And so making more money, figuring out how to increase margin, that it's necessary, right?
Yeah.
Because, and we have clients that we've talked to, some at-home parents that, after a divorce now have to figure out, okay, what do I do to create more income? I've got to get a job, or I've got to, bring in, money somewhere. And so, if you're too dependent on one income source or under leveraging your skill set, like there's different ways to increase your income. And also, and I'm not saying that you prepare for, this is more people that have gone through a divorce or are going through it now, right? We want to have your financial house in order so that should anything happen, like John said, any curveball in life, that you're structured properly. You don't want to sit in a marriage and be like calculating for your divorce, right? Typically that's, it's not what we're encouraging. But when your structure is good, then when you get to that point that you're separating finances, it's not so overwhelming. I was talking to somebody, responded to my post about our event the other day, and she's like, I walked away and didn't take anything. And, I let him have everything. And I think that so many times we make decisions out of emotion.
Yeah.
And I made decisions out of emotion financially, like, fine, you can have this, fine, I'll take this, fine, da, da, da. And it was because you have this feeling of just wanting it over with instead of being intentional and understanding that it is going to be a financial impact, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about our 3M framework, it all works together. We've got to increase income intentionally while tightening the management of our money and still maintaining that multiplication. A lot of times that those assets, which we might go into this in a little bit, but get separated. So if you only increase income, then a lot of times that lifestyle is immediately going to eat that up because you're now doubling your expenses. So
yeah. Well, that's a lot of it, right? I mean, you go through the divorce, and like you said, nobody necessarily wants a divorce, especially when you first start out. That's not even probably on the radar, at least in a first marriage, right? I think second marriage, especially with blended families and things, there's a lot of prenups and kind of pre-planning going on in the event that something should happen, because it already has in that case once before. But really kind of looking at how do you get through that? And one of them is try to take that emotion off the table. I mean, I know, a lot of, I think you went through this with the attorneys, and I've had friends get divorced in the attorney. My situation was a little different. We kind of have everything kind of pre-negotiated out. We went down the path, hey, let's try to make this work. That didn't really happen, and so it kind of came to a point where, okay, well, really the only other alternative is this, and kind of breaking down the financial aspect of it. And we split, everything pretty much 50-50 right down the middle. So there wasn't that big expense. We did, I think it's called non-contested or uncontested divorce.
Uncontested, yeah.
Uncontested, yeah. So, the attorney network that, we've partnered with Prosper in the Kingdom, they actually handled it for me, and it was part of my membership. So I had to pay the state fees, and it was like $250. That was it.
You have the cheapest divorce of anyone I've ever
I know, right? It's because you plan accordingly, right? And you realize, hey, it wasn't a situation where you're trying to hide anything. It's just like, okay, put it all out there. Here it is. Draw a line down the middle. Let's kind of structure it this way. And I'm not giving legal advice. That's what the attorneys are for. But because of that, I mean, you think about it. You go through a nasty divorce. The attorneys are smiling because they're going to be the ones that get a lot of your money. And that's not what either party wants, especially when you have kids involved. So that's kind of the route we took. And, we're still friends today. I mean, it honestly, doesn't feel like a whole lot's changed. But that managing part is key, right? Not only managing the finances, but managing your plan, managing your next chapter. And really, for those, if you're one of those people in the couple that may not make as much money as the spouse or the partner, you definitely want to have your house in order as you're going up to that point of divorce, because that's going to help you from a planning standpoint, especially when you're sitting down looking at the budgeting aspect of it, because you've had two incomes. Maybe there was a stay-at-home spouse, things like that. So that changes a lot. And all of a sudden, you're now trying to figure it out on your own, and maybe you didn't even know where the bills were or anything. So it's critical that you kind of get your house in order before you go to divorce. Obviously, if you haven't done that, you got divorced, it's better late than never, right? So when you have a proper management piece in place, right? Make, manage, multiply, it really helps you stabilize everything. And that stabilizing effect in turn gives you a sense of empowerment, as well as, I don't want to say calmness, because there's still a lot of emotion going through the divorce, but it takes that aspect of it off the table, or at least helps diminish it tremendously, right? That debt that felt manageable with two incomes can be suffocating for one if you end up with half the debt. The spending patterns that maybe you're a spender, right? Typically in a relationship, one's a saver, one's a spender. Maybe if you're the spender, something that once worked with two incomes, now all of a sudden that gap is exposed and it doesn't work anymore. And then really looking at, the debt, the Bible says it, right? Proverbs 22:7, the borrower is slave to the lender. And so that's something you want to keep in control, that debt reduces flexibility because you're locked in, right? Increases pressure. Okay. I've been there, right? I had a lot of debt when I was younger, first starting off my career, newly married. And it also limits your options, right? If your income is the accelerator, management is the steering wheel. And, that's going to really kind of keep you focused on, hey, I've got my house in order. I got my house in control. And without it, that speed increases risk, right? And so that's where it's, the faster you go, income is the accelerator, right? If you don't have that management, that steering wheel, it's going to increase your risk of something really going wrong, financially, bankruptcy or whatever the case may be. So, to take an action item away, a practical move is, as you're kind of going through this, think about your finances and list your 3 biggest financial pressure points, right? Is it debt? Maybe you've got a lot of high interest credit cards, stuff like that. Is it fixed expenses are too high? I'm talking like, possible utilities, things like that. Or maybe you've got some loans out there, student loans, any kind of debt. And, do you have an emergency buffer? If you're living check to check and you've got no breathing room, no margin whatsoever, one little thing goes wrong, furlough, layoff, whatever, and it's gonna decimate, any financial piece that you had whatsoever. So the goal is pick one and build a 90-day reduction plan, right? Just take how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And that's what we do kind of on a holistic scale and a larger scale with our clients, right? And, we talk about that. We'll talk about it a little later too. If you want to take action with us, we'd love to help you. But if not, you can do it to some degree on your own to give you a little bit of peace and at least start planning. But burying your head in the sand is not going to be the strategy that's going to win for you, right? Not just hoping it all works out and then you get the divorce and all of a sudden it's like, what do I do now? And I know it's hard. I know you're in an emotional place if you're going through it right now, but it's something that it needs to be done, right? Clarity reduces stress faster than income does.
Yeah. And then, moving into that multiply piece, we see a lot of times, especially if there were investment accounts, those get divided up and, you might be the person that's like, oh, now I've got to put more towards, to make up for that. But then we also see the flip side where people just stop investing entirely and get super protective of their money and are afraid to make any moves, right? They go into defensive mode and that feels safe to them, right? But honestly, that's pausing that multiplication that could be happening. And a lot of times when we pause that multiplication, we're pausing it in areas that are not outpacing of inflation, right? So you're actually losing money in the process.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. I don't think there is no such thing as a pause. It's you when you stop contributing or stop making moves, you just start going backwards. You're either moving forwards or backwards when it comes to building wealth, building stability financially, and all those things. There is no pause. So I would agree 100% with your statement.
Yeah. And so, it's important to focus on continually, putting away, figuring out the new structure on your own and how you're going to continue to build for the future. And that durable multiply strategy can include things, traditional growth, but alongside of what John and I teach, with protected asset classes is always important. To help reduce that downside to, with the market-driven returns. So we want those market-driven returns, but protect against the loss because a lot of times, again, moving after a divorce, you have half of what you used to. And so we don't want to keep everything in one basket. It needs to be blended and structured. And so, and then, I also want to say this too, that, finding that new normal, I think it's easy in fear to get to this point where you're just like, you cut everything off, kind of the head in the sand a little bit that you were saying, John, like, you're just like, I'm done. I'm not, and you fear everything moving forward and you don't want to do anything with your money. And so it's just important to have people helping you too. And one more thing I want to say, and then I'm passing it back to you, but
you're fine.
Is be careful with fighting too much. I think one huge, most costly thing that we see in divorce is when there's so much fighting. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day who owes their attorney $100,000.
Whoa, man.
Like, is it worth it? And every time you contact the attorney or you feel ticked off or you want some kind of vengeance or whatever, you're robbing from your future self because you're going in debt to that attorney.
Yeah.
And so
not only that, not only that, I mean, you're robbing from your kids too, right? Because it's creating animosity and it's creating frustration, and it's one of those things that, I mean, that's 100 grand you could have left your kids, right?
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that when again, kind of reflecting my own personal experience, we sat down and it's like, okay, hey, we're at this crossroad now, and we're not gonna be able to salvage it. That was kind of the final decision. So we can go and be angry and bitter and spend up
Mhm.
a bunch of money, or realize the fact that, hey, we've got three amazing children and we both love them tremendously, right? And we've got future graduations, marriages, grandkids coming up, and rather than have it being this weird, tense thing for everybody involved,
Right.
it can be, kind of a new norm, and that's the path that we've taken. And knock on wood, coming up 3 years now, and it's working. I mean, it's not been easy, I wouldn't say, especially at first, but every day that goes by, the easier it gets. And like you said, I literally challenge anybody on the price of the divorce that I had. Not that I'm proud of that, obviously. That not is not the direction that I wanted to go out, but it doesn't have to be that crazy. What's mine is mine. Whatever, right? That financial argument, because at the end of
Right.
the day, it's all money, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, go out and make some more, or whatever the case may be. But if you have a plan in place and try to remove the emotion as much as you can, you can really do some amazing things, and look at divorce not as a blame game, because it's, in reality, I don't care who did what. There were two people at fault. There always are, right? You may not want to own it. But and I'm not going to say in 100% of the cases, but at least 95% of the cases, something was happening on both sides of the table that created this issue.
Mhm.
So look at it as a reset moment, right? What's done is done. And that divorce from a financial perspective forces clarity, right? And it forces conversations about money that may have been avoided for years. Now you're having the conversation with yourself on, okay, maybe I do spend too much, maybe I'm not out there maximizing my abilities and capacity, things like that.
Mhm.
But it also provides something powerful, and that's the reset, right? And not only for your finances, but for you personally. Maybe it's a chance for you to start growing in a certain direction, or whatever the case may be. Do some self-reflection, because it's so easy to play the blame game, even on the finances, right?
Mhm.
But truth of the matter, at the end of the day, guess what? Your next chapter doesn't really matter anymore, and that's where it once you kind of get through that emotion. At least this was my experience. You really hit that reset, and you get to rebuild intentionally with a plan, right? You get to reestablish your financial house. Okay.
Mhm.
You get to do it with wisdom instead of assumption. Okay. And you're not starting from ground zero, because you've already learned from the last, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however long you've been married, right? And even if you're not divorced, again, this could be a reset for you on a job loss, right? Getting downsized, whatever the case may be. Ask yourself, is your financial life, we're stress tested tomorrow, what would be exposed, right? So think about your financial house. If you had a major curveball, or even if you're not divorced, you're just listening to the episode, right? Throw that scenario, test your financial house against that scenario. What would it look like? How would you land? What about your margin, right? What about debt? Are you over dependent on just one income, right?
Mhm.
Are you overexposed to market volatility? You keep looking at the market, housings, the housing listings, the inventory is going way up. Interest rates have changed, obviously, but they're not what they were a few years ago. And so it's like people aren't buying houses like they used to, things like that. So, are you overexposed to market volatility? It's better to strengthen structure before life forces the issue, right? So that's what I'm
Mhm.
trying to say there. So just to kind of close and recap, I mean, there's a lot we could cover on this. A couple of resources for you. One, there's a group called Divorce Care. I personally went through that, loved it, and it was a fantastic experience. If you're going through a divorce or have gone through a divorce recently, I would strongly encourage you to find a divorce care group in your area. Just, I think it's divorcecare.org. But they've got classes all throughout the United States, so it's an amazing class. Also, as Wendy mentioned, Prosper in the Kingdom, we're actually hosting a divorce and money masterclass. It's free of charge. It's virtual. It's going to go for about 45 minutes, and that's going to be tomorrow, February 26th, Thursday, at 8:30 Eastern. If you're interested in it, we'll put the link to register in the show notes. And register, come and check it out, and it'll give you a lot of good takeaways to think about, whether it's you're currently going through it now. And ideally, that's the best time to start planning, because it's like, okay, hey, this next chapter is going to be here soon. What's it going to look like? And that way you walk into that next chapter prepared and, have a plan in place. Or maybe you've been divorced for a little while and it's like, man, it feels like a whirlwind. If, you feel like Dorothy in the house and the Wizard of Oz, when's it going to end? Well, this may be a good first step in kind of getting everything settled down, so to speak. But use the link. And then also, if you want clarity in your own structure, we always throw this out there. Work with somebody. If you don't have anybody to work with, we'd love to work with you. Just go to safemoneyroadmap.com and get a free financial plan. Do something with it or not, that's completely your call. But at least now you've got some kind of plan of action and know where you stand. But again, just to remind yourself, it's stressful and, I don't say devastating, because some cases maybe, oh my gosh, I feel, better. But divorce does not have to define your future or your financial future, right? But exposure can become your turning point. Okay. And, again, manage and multiply. Structure changes outcomes and experiences and stress massively. So the better prepared you are, the better planned you are, the easier your transition in that next chapter is going to be. So Wendy, anything else to add before we close?
No, just show up to the class if you need help. And yep.
Yeah, I'd love to have you guys there. So if you got something out of this, do us a favor, help us out. Subscribe and give us, if you're listening to us on one of our podcast platforms, give us a 5 review. We would love that. That really helps us out, and it only takes a second for you to do it. And then also, if you're watching us on the YouTube channel, this is episode 230. So, wow. That's a lot of free content for you to kind of help get your financial house in order. You can find all thing's links at our website, prosperingthekingdom.com. And like I said, if this has been a blessing to you, share it with somebody in your social media. We'd love some feedback. So make a comment or two. And if there's something you'd like to hear about a topic on, maybe rental properties, maybe, investing in raw land or whatever the case may be, put it out there. Crypto, gold, silver, platinum, put it out there, and we'll see if we can't get an episode on the air for you. And that's it, folks. So we'll see you next Wednesday on another Prosper in the Kingdom. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Prosper in the Kingdom. If this episode added value to your day, be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with someone who could use the encouragement. For more resources, head to prosperinthekingdom.com. Let's continue building lives of purpose and abundance, one step at a time.